good to see you all. There's this lecture today, and then we have the Robert Harris Memorial next Tuesday, and then after that we have a lecture where we all gather together and you present your burden called a final exam to me, and I send you off with my best wishes. But it's not time for that yet. There have been students who have registered to take the exams in the disability office. I have had contact from 2 of you. If that is the situation for you, will you please come and see me after the lecture, because I can't approve you taking it unless you've made an arrangement to take the exam there. Can you hear me? Am I projecting well? All the way in the back? So nice. Some of you always sit in the same seats. I hope that those of you who took part in some of the commemorations on Sunday enjoyed your experience. We have the computer set up to show our speakers information, but before we did that, I very happily got some photographs from Maria. Thank you, Maria. And we had a short PowerPoint presentation of participation in the Walk to End Genocide. There is one more that I know of. Walk Against Genocide, Lake Merritt, Oakland, Sunday the 29th. The speakers are Carl Wilkins. You know who Carl Wilkins is. Who can identify who Carl Wilkins is? Loudly.
He's the Adventist that sheltered Tutsis.
The last American left in Rwanda, who rescued over 100 people. And Gregory Stanton, who is someone who does great work and has an organization. He's the president of Genocide Watch. And this is sponsored by Humanity United. I'm becoming very positive about and hopeful the number of organizations that are attempting to change the situation in the world. I want to thank all of you for your participation yesterday at the walk or at the commemoration. Please hand in your one-page reflection on your participation. If you were at Congregation Beth Ami, you got a program. Please staple your response to the program, and that will be evidence of your attendance. Allison collected the names of student participants in the walk. If you did not give your name to Allison, I guess you need to talk to me or speak to me about how you're going to tell us that you did, in fact, attend the walk. I want to thank Kimberly and Cody and all of the students who worked. And thanks for your photographs, Maria. They were very nice. I'm sorry you missed them up on the big screen. If you want, I'll send you a PowerPoint of them. Okay. We are and have been committed to presenting information on as many genocides as we possibly can, and it has been a few years since we have been able to present information about the genocide in Bosnia. We are most pleased to have with us Lejla Mavris, who is the Vice President of the Global Majority. We had Hamdan Gumas, who is also associated with the global majority who came to speak about Sudan and South Sudan, things you're probably studying about or have been studying about. Lejla is a founding member of the global majority and is its current vice president. She was the executive director of Global Majority in 2006 to 2007 and president of the board from 2009 to 2010. She is originally from Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. She came to the States as a refugee in 1993. There were a lot of refugees in 1933 too. And she returned back for the first time in 1998. Lejla received a master's degree in international policy studies and a certificate in conflict resolution from the Monterey Institute of International Studies. She received further training in conflict analysis through the United States Institute of Peace and in post-conflict reconstruction DDR and humanitarian negotiations through the Naval Postgraduate School workshops. She started her career interning at the United Nations Development Program in Sarajevo, followed by working at the United Nations Refugee Agency Evaluation and Policy Analysis Unit Office in Geneva for the International Professional Service semester, publishing her work on refugee smuggling and migration. She was an assistant training consultant at the Institute for International Mediation and Conflict Resolution for those programs in Prague and in Cyprus. For the past 6 years, she has taught negotiation, mediation, and conflict resolution skills to students and teachers in California, Costa Rica, Jordan, Jerusalem, Nepal, and South Africa. She is an advocate for peace, nonviolence, and love. Would you please join me in greeting Lejla for this year's lecture?
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me here today. It's a perfect timing, I guess, for me to give this talk about Bosnia, as I just returned from there last night, about 11. And given the 9-hour time difference, it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning for me right now. So I've had coffee, I've had rest, and I'll do my best to be as present and alert. But again, it is in a way my life story, so it also doesn't take too much to tell it. So I'm here today to talk about what happened in my country 20 years ago now. But since it is personal, I'd like to start off with the personal story, like exactly how it affected me, what happened to me. So I'll be a bit brief about that, and it probably, as a result of all of that, I ended up doing what I'm doing today because I saw nothing else really for me to do other than stick to conflict resolution. So it was in 1992 that the war, in April of 92, that the war in Bosnia began. And I was 13 years old at that time. And, I'm from Sarajevo, which is the capital city, which is in Europe. It's just a smaller version of any other European city. I mean, it's probably very similar, most similar to like Budapest or Prague or something like that. So, it's we've had a life of that anybody else in such cities would have. As a matter of fact, we had it a bit better than most other people did, because Yugoslavia, which was ex-Yugoslavia, which all these countries came out of, it was the perfect grounds between the East and the West. I mean, during the Cold War, you had the West, but then you had the Eastern Bloc, the Soviet Union, which really had the Iron Curtain, which really was difficult for people to move around. But yet for us, we were free. It was actually the most accepted passport in the world at that time. You could travel almost anywhere except for about five countries without any visa. So it was wonderful. We had everything. Living in the city, we would have long summer breaks, one month off for winter time, where we would spend time either on the coast. Most people had vacation houses on the coast, or you go skiing in the mountains all winter long. You live your life, you travel, you play outside. It's safe. It's wonderful. So. I remember coming home, actually, we were with my family at my grandparents' house, and we came home and I saw just in front of our house just a bunch of my friends. So I said, okay, I'll just stay out and play for a while. I said, okay, everything's fine. And my parents went upstairs, and we live on a 17th floor in a part of city called Grbavce. So you have these like tall buildings that are amongst all the hills, and so we were out playing, and all of a sudden you hear a couple of like bang bangs, like kind of far away, and we're like, what was that? Maybe some fireworks, something, I don't know, but whatever. My dad gets on the window, which was also a normal thing for him to do when it was time for me to go home. He gets on the window from 17th floor and yells, Lejla, come home, And I'm like, 5 more minutes, 5 more. I was like, okay. And then like a few minutes later, we hear some more shots. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And he's like, okay, get in the house now. So I go home. And this was on April 6th of 1992. And that was pretty much the last time I went out and hung out and played with my friends and had my life the way I had it. After that, right away, a full-on war just started. And being on 17th floor between these two hills, which was the front lines, which is basically where the war began, right away we were just stuck in the house. We couldn't do anything. I would like want to look out the window. I could see, the people with snipers hiding behind the trees and with guns. Like it's like watching a movie. It was crazy. They would yell at me to get off the window, and it went on like that for first couple of days. It was interesting because we didn't have school. We could still talk to each other on the phone among friends, and we were like, okay, it's kind of nice not to have school for a few days. But then after a while, we were like, okay, I'm ready to get back to my life. What's going on? So, but they were not, it just kept escalating. The violence kept escalating. We were just in shock of what was going on. So after a few weeks, about 3 or 4 weeks, my parents saw that maybe it was better if they sent me out until things settled down. So because my mother, who was arranging, she was working with the U.S. Embassy, and we were a new country, so we had no embassy. So the closest embassy was in Belgrade, and there was one more airplane that was leaving from Sarajevo, and it was going to Belgrade. And so my parents drove me to the airport. I barely said even goodbye to anybody. We were driving really fast. We got to the airport, which was just crowded with people everywhere. And they sent me off. And as a 13-year-old, I couldn't have any luggage, of course, but I had another smaller child sitting in my lap because it was just about getting as many people out as possible. But still, at this time, we were, the plan was that I was going to go to Belgrade. I was going to get a visa to come to United States for a couple of months until things settle down, and then go back to Sarajevo and go back to school and continue my life. And once I got to Belgrade, they actually denied, at the embassy, they denied my visa. They said, we don't give you a visa because we don't think you're going to come back. And of course, that's another shock, because of course I will go back, and what am I going to do now? I'm stuck in Belgrade. I can't go back to Bosnia. I mean, I don't really have somebody to stay with. Luckily, the communications lines were still on. So I could call my parents, and they found some family friend that I could stay with, and that was fine. They took me in, and then every day I would watch news from Belgrade. So obviously they were Serbian news, and I could see Ratko Karadzic, who was the leader of the Bosnian Serb leader, on TV just in the hills above Sarajevo with a big map. And on the news, this is portraying on the news, saying, holding the map and saying, giving the coordinates, for example, like A2. Like, you can shoot A2, there are not that many Serbs there. And, I'm like, okay. I mean, still as a child, you're a little bit confused. You don't really understand what's going on. Who are Serbs? Who are Croats? Who am I? So all of a sudden, these things become important. So I would call my family, of course, as much as I could. And then one day, I was talking with my father on the phone, and he said, oh, no, I have to go now. I have to go because the 18th floor is burning, the floor above us. So he hangs up the phone, and that day, the Serbs also bombed the communications building, and all the communication is cut off for basically the remaining of the war. So from there, for about 6 months after that, I really had no news about what's going on with my father, whether he's dead or alive, because the city our part of town is the first place that got occupied, that fell under the Serb occupation, and the last place that got liberated. So if he stayed there, they would have taken him in. If he escaped, like, he had to go over a bridge, it's still open. Like, I just had no idea what happened. So also eventually 6 months had to pass, and I could reapply for a visa to United States, which they gave me a tourist visa at that time for 1 month. And I came to United States, and I came to Kansas first because there was a family that was hosting me. And as soon as I arrived, I of course had to apply for a political asylum and receive a refugee process. I remember we had to, from Kansas, drive to Chicago because that was the closest immigration office, and I had to have an interview for political asylum, and I went there, and they basically just looked at me, and from Bosnia, and like, there are no questions that they needed to ask, really, because it was so obvious. So, just to finish my personal story, everything's fine. My parents did survive, and my father, at the end, got out through the tunnel that if you have known some things about Bosnian war, they built. Sarajevo is like a little bowl, or a big bowl, I guess. It sits in the middle, surrounded with mountains, and every one of these mountains was occupied by Serb forces. There was one, even the airport, and next to the airport there was one mountain that was, but kind of far away, that was Bosnian army occupied. So towards the end of the war, they dug out, the Bosnian people dug out the tunnel under the airport, which was also the path that a lot of the food and arms and everything was like smuggled in and out, because it was completely blocked off city for 4 years. So eventually people were also passing through to get out if they could. So that's in a very small, brief summary what my experience with the war. There isn't a single person. We were about 5.5 million people country. there isn't a single person of those 5.5 million that has not been affected by the war in Bosnia. Everybody has some sort of scars and experience and memories of it. Even those that came out, even those that are younger than 20 who have been born during or after the war. So, as I said, it started in April of 1992, and already in May, about a month after that, a UN Undersecretary General came to Sarajevo, and I'm just going to read the quote, what he said 1 month after the beginning of the war. All international observers agree that what is happening is a concerted effort by the Serbs of Bosnia and Herzegovina, with at least some support from the Yugoslav National Army, to create ethnically pure regions in the context of negotiations on a continuization of the republic. The techniques used are seizure of territory by military force and the intimidation of the non-Serb populations. The fighting and intimidation have led to massive displacement of civilians. And there was no response. There was no response for a long time to come. Can you pull up the first map? Yes, that one. So this map, now this is the map of Bosnia, and I just want to give you some of the statistics of the war. The current population in Bosnia is about 4 million, so it's about 1 million less than before the war. This doesn't mean that all the million people have been killed, but 200,000 were killed. Out of those 200,000 people that were killed, more than 12,000 are children. 500,000 women were raped. And there were over 2 million, about 2.5 million refugees or displaced persons as a result of the war. During the war, they were just held by Serb organized. There were over 600, no, not over, there were exactly 677 concentration camps. And they had 14,000 people, mainly Bosniaks and Croats, in those camps, out of which 10,000 died. There were also detention camps that Serbs were held in by Bosniak or the Croat forces, but those were extremely significantly less in numbers. In statistics from the International Catholic Relief Services, from 1997, it shows that there were still 21,000 people missing, and in 2005, still about 14,500 people that were missing. Those that were really discovered is because, when you discover a mass grave, you all of a sudden discover hundreds or thousands of people at once. So it's a bit about discovering those very buried graves. So it's interesting. Now I will get to this later, but there are families of the missing persons now all over Bosnia, who are one of the examples of people of the civil society groups working together really on helping each other find the remains of their family members across the border. So, as one example of genocide, since we're talking about genocide, I will just give you an overview of what happened in Srebrenica. And if you see on the map here, the biggest right black dot, that's Srebrenica. Okay, if you see this line that kind of divides Bosnia, that is the division right now. So the whole is the country of Bosnia, but which is divided into two entities. And one is called the Federation, mainly Bosnia Croat entity, and the other side is called Republika Srpska, which is mainly Serb populated entity. And you see that Srebrenica belongs to Republika Srpska, which is just a big shock in itself, really. And it's a very successful example of genocide and ethnic cleansing that took place. So in 1991, the census of Srebrenica, they said there was about 37,000 people there, and about 73% were Bosniak or Muslims, and 25% Serbs. And maybe just to explain you a little bit the composition of Bosnian people, you have Bosnians are a nationality. It's a nationality. It's like saying an American. Within Bosnia, there are three main ethnic groups. You have Bosniak, you have Croat, and you have Serb. Somehow they also correlate with three religions. Bosniak are Muslim, Croats are Catholics, and Serbs are Orthodox. And this is very confusing because people use the religion and ethnic group interchangeably. For example, I'm considered a Bosniak Muslim. I'm not really a practicing Muslim by any means. It's the tradition of my family. We do a few things like here in the United States, everybody celebrates Christmas. Doesn't mean that they're really religious people, but it's really more of a traditional thing than some religion that you truly identify with. So for the most part, that's how Bosnian people in general are. But these three groups, these divisions, ethnic divisions, religion divisions, that are somehow imposed one way or the other, have created problems that have happened in the country and continue to create problems even now and in the future. So, back to Srebrenica. First, the Serb forces, this is an example of how genocide takes place. Serb forces come in and they start expelling the surrounding areas and they start committing attacks on just the local population. So you have almost 75% of the population that are Bosniaks. And they do a lot of, during that time, they collect people in schools, they torture people, inhumane treatments, even like the imam, which is the equivalent of like a priest in a church. Imam is in a mosque. So they really have inhumane treatments of these people. So at this time, the Bosniak men in that area gather up and they go up into the mountains. Bosnia, all of Bosnia is a very mountainous region. And they regroup, they think of the strategy and so forth, and then they go back and do an attack on the Serb population, and they take over Srebrenica from those Serbs that took it in the first place. But also the surrounding town. That whole area is about 900 square kilometers, so like maybe 600 square miles or so. So the Bosnian army now has took control over this territory. But what happened was, you see the location of Srebrenica where it is. It was, and right next to it, that's Serbia. And it was never connected to the remaining of the Bosnian army-controlled territory. So like those people, those Bosnian army people that were there, they couldn't get any support. They couldn't receive any support. So all of a sudden there was a counterattack, and 50 to 60,000 people were pushed into an area that's about 80 square miles. I mean, imagine all of a sudden this deep population concentration, and they were all put into Srebrenica. Then UNHCR, the refugee agency, came in and they saw like the movement and what's happening. They could really predict each step of what was going on. There was just no intervention on the side of international community in many regards. And they evacuated about 9,000 people to a nearby Bosnian army-controlled town called Tuzla. And then attacks, so in July of 95, the war ended in December of 95. In July of 1995, those major attacks of mass killings began on the 6th of July. A couple of days after that, this was of course considered a safe enclave by the UN peacekeeping forces controlled by the Dutch forces, they were ordered to leave this safe zone. Then Ratko Mladic is another Bosnian Serb leader. He was like the commander of the Serb forces in Bosnia. So Ratko Mladic and Radovan Karadzic were the two main Bosnian Serb leaders. He was, there's a clip on this, on the Serb TV, he says, "Here we are on July 11th, 1995, in Serb Srebrenica, on the eve of a great Serb festival, and at last the time has come to take our revenge on the Turks in this part of the world." And 8,000 people were killed, massacred. I have a book here. I brought a couple of books, but here's this one that it has some pictures of Srebrenica, but the amazing part is that starting here, this much of the book, it's all names in very kind of small letters. All names of people that were massacred in those few days only. So there's a memorial that's placed in a nearby Srebrenica now, in a little tiny place called Potočari. Srebrenica is now a Serb-populated area. There are really no Muslims living there. There's a river that divides Srebrenica and this place, Potočari, Muslims live there, Srebrenica, Serbs live there. And after the war, Serbs have completely denied the atrocities that they took place. Every year on the anniversary, actually the picture that was up first, the black picture, I took this picture of a TV. This is a TV screen. On this day, I was in Sarajevo on this day last year, and for 24 hours on TV channel, on Bosnian TV channels, this is what you see. There are no commercials, nothing else, just a black screen like this. And every year on this anniversary of the massacre, you have a lot of. You never have anything from the Serb side, not to even talk about in terms of apologies or anything like that, but just even of acknowledgement of what took place. ICTY, which is the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, only recognizes Srebrenica as genocide, as one sole genocide event that took place in Bosnia. And it's the first one, that was the first one ever since the Holocaust, since the World War II genocide in Europe. So there, Karadzic, Mladic, and 11 other Serbs have been indicted on the charges of genocide in addition to others. So what is genocide anyway? Genocide is not just mass killing of people. And I think the Bosnian War has really expanded this term, like what does it mean to have genocide? And in some Serb literature, they actually have a very clear 5 perfect steps to ethnic cleansing and genocide. It's like a toolbook, I guess. First, concentration. You surround area to be cleansed. You warn the Serbs, urging them to leave. Then you have decapitation, you execute political leaders and those that are capable of replacing them. Separation, you divide the men and women and old men from the 16 to 60 fighting age men. Evacuation, you transport the women and children, expel them to another territory, and then liquidation, execute the fighting age men and dispose of the bodies. And then now on the maps, if I can have the last two maps. Yeah, those colored ones. That one. So this is Bosnia. This is a map of Bosnia, what it looked like with ethnic groups before the war. So the red are the Serb ethnicity, the blue are the Croats, and the green are the Bosniaks. So before the war, Bosnia was a very mixed country. Like, it wasn't like, okay, you go to Srebrenica and only these people live there, you go here. It was mixed. Marriages were mixed. Nobody really cared that you marry somebody from your ethnic group, but somebody that you want to be with. That, you know, I would say another part of ethnic cleansing and genocide is how many marriages were destroyed during the war, you know, because all of a sudden you have one husband and wife from two different ethnic groups, and who are their children then? And so many times children, like if there are two sons, they found themselves fighting face to face on the front lines, one for the other army. And how do you deal with that? And, you know, what kind of post-conflict trauma that creates? Because Bosnian army was comprised of not only Muslim people, not only Bosniaks or Croats, but it was of the Bosnians. All those who truly felt their first identity as a Bosnian national before the identity towards an ethnic group. So the Bosnian army, which was created during the war, I mean, as soon as the country was formed and got its independence, the war started. So they were just people that gathered together. Then the Serb army, on the other hand, before the war, the Yugoslav National Army of our former Yugoslavia, most of those leaders were, that army was Serb army. The people that made a career out of military, they were Serbs. So, and they were very strong army. So the ex-Yugoslavia military all of a sudden became this, the force of, of the aggressors. And then there was an arms embargo on the country. So the Serbs had all the weapons, but the Bosnians, in order to fight back, didn't have much weapons. So what happened through the tunnel that they made, they were smuggling. This comes back now to the identity. Now you had all these people from the Middle East, the Muslims, saying, oh, we need to help our Muslim brothers and sisters. They start smuggling weapons into Bosnia to help the Bosnian army defend itself, which actually kind of worked, which caused additional problems after the war, which now Bosnia is becoming divided. You see things in Bosnia that you have never seen before. I'm walking around, I don't know if I'm in Jerusalem or in Sarajevo, because it's not our culture what has become after, now in the country. So this was before the war, and if you click on the other map, this is what the war has created. This is how the population is spread out throughout the country now. I would like to take just a very brief few minutes to bore you a bit with a far, far, far back history of maybe some possible understanding of how we got to where we got now. So if you go back up to the first, or that, yes, that one. This map, and sorry, it's small size, maybe you can make it bigger even. So, I mean, there's always the story of who was there first. And even these maps and what I'm going to talk about, it's only like, okay, you had the medieval Bosnia, you had the Hungarian and the Byzantine empires that ruled the country, but you had people there, of course, even before that. How far back do you want to go? And then you had, there was a King Tvrtko, the ruler of Bosnia, which was, of the shape of the Bosnia. And his rule ended in 1391. And after that, some other dynasties were there. And then in 1463, the Ottoman Empire came in. And it was almost a 400-year rule of the Ottoman Empire. Bosnia was actually quite a unique case in the Ottoman Empire because it had a lot of wealth and prosperity at that time. A lot of this is when we start having the Muslim people in the country, some of them who are the Turks themselves, and that's why when the Serbs say, okay, let's get rid of all these Turks, it's because they think of us as Turks now because of the Ottoman Empire that even, it started in 15th century, and but a lot of also Slavs, Yugoslavia is the people of the South Slavs that came down from like Siberia and Russia and so forth. So a lot of Slavs converted to Islam, and then you had the Turks who were there who were Muslim as well. But you had also a population of Jews that migrated to Bosnia at that time, especially from Spain, escaping the persecutions there. You also had Catholics that were protected. They had an official imperial decree that was protecting the Catholics, and then Orthodox also spread throughout the country, and they had prosperity also until about the end of the 19th century. After the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian, the dual kingdom of Austria and Hungary, took over the power, and they wanted also to make Bosnia a model colony. You see, why are all these people so interested in Bosnia is because it was just such a perfect, it truly is like a meeting place between the East and the West. All of the, it was an entry point into the Europe or Western Europe from these huge empires, from the powers of the East. So it was very important for whoever had control of it to make it a model place, so that whenever the first people that come through see it, they will have one example of what it's like. So during the Austrian-Hungarian kingdom, there was a rise in nationalism by the Croats or the Catholics and the Serb and the Orthodox, and they didn't really want to be united with Bosnia so much. And then if you go to the next map, you see the Austro-Hungarian Empire included Bosnia, and Serbia had its own still, a bit of its own separation still. The Ottoman Empire by that time has retrieved quite a bit. What happened was there was an agreement between the Ottoman Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire that it was going to be, Bosnia was going to be under the Austro-Hungarian, it was going to be a colony, but it's still an Ottoman province. So it was sort of a joint power sharing of the country. There was a lot of movement during this time between by the Young Turks who resisted this power sharing, but also from Russia, who always have supported the Serbs and Serbians, and that was against the expansion of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which a little bit of European history. In 1914 in Sarajevo, Serb nationalist Gavrilo Princip shot the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which started the World War I. And if you go to the next map, So after the World War I, you had a joint kingdom of, there was an agreement between the Croats, the Serbs, and the Slovenes to create the kingdom of Southern Slavs, which is Yugoslavia. And this lasted, excuse me, and this lasted, throughout the World War II as well. But there was a lot of conflict and tension already between the Croats and the Serbs there, because Croats wanted to have more of the federalism, and they started wanting to have a creation of a separate Croatian state, and yet Serbs wanted more of a centralized government, and because they were the predominant force in government and military. And if you go on the next map, this was during the World War II. You can see that the German and Italian forces occupied most of what is now Yugoslavia, and the others were the Russian and the other forces. So it was during this time that these huge nationalist movements from the Serb side called Chetniks, and from the Croat side called Ustaše. And Chetniks and Ustaše were the biggest Serb or Croat nationalists that rose out, and Ustaše tied in with the Italians, and Chetniks eventually tied in with the Nazi forces as well. First trying to defend them, but then joining them, and this is where Tito came, who created like this partisan army, who united the Croats and the Serbs and the Slovenes and the Bosnians to fight off all of the Nazi forces from the Yugoslavian territory. He succeeded in doing that, and as a result, he created Yugoslavia, which is then the next map maybe. So maybe go one more down. Looks like no. Okay, we can go back to that one. So all of these different colors. This was created after the World War II. Actually, still during the World War II in 1943, Bosnia, the state of Bosnia was recreated. There was a big agreement between all the people. And after the war in 1945, Yugoslavia became a country. Tito became its leader, and Tito was half Slovene, half Croat, who lived and died in Belgrade. So. And he managed to keep all of these people together. So during the time of Tito, it was really interesting because people came together, and so he ruled from 1945 until 1980 when he died. And there was some unity among all of the people, because there was a common force that was fought off. Like everybody fought off the enemy, the Nazis. We didn't have to ever submit to the Soviet bloc. We never had to submit to anybody. Like we were truly like independent of everything, taking the best of all the worlds, and a lot of economic development, also through maybe some too many loans and so forth, were created, but there was just a sense of unity and power, and like you had these the work missions where everybody will go out and like volunteer days of work on building the roads or the train tracks or whatever. It's like it was a great time. Everybody talks only the greatest things during that time, except you did have people like Milosevic that were jailed for talking against Yugoslavia and others as well. So there was some political oppression at that time. I'm not saying it was completely perfect. But when Tito died in 1980, what happened was there was nobody to take over his leadership position. And all of a sudden, everybody goes back to nationalism. because the way it worked during Yugoslavia, it was one country with 6 republics, or you can say 6 states, and these are the 6 states. And so you had a centralized government in Belgrade, which is in Serbia, but then each state had its own government. I mean, sort of like United States in a way, you can say, except that there was still some centrality, a bit more than, for example, Washington, D.C. here, that went back to Belgrade. So eventually, with the downturn of the economics and the rise of these nationalistic powers and ideas, different states wanted to separate. And it started off with Slovenia and Croatia. And Slovenia has always had the best economy, the most production, and so forth. And yet, majority of its economic gains had to go back to Belgrade, and they didn't like that. So they separated, followed by Croatia. Croatia had the war, then Bosnia came, and it was a big mess because this vision of greater Serbia was being lost. Within Bosnia, you had, such a mix of people living there. You had 30% of almost each group living in the country, that it was very difficult for anybody to give it up. Not just from the Serb side, then the Croats came in from the south, and then we all know what happened. So what I'd like to tell you also, that what is the result of all of this? So what happened after the war, or even the political structure during the war. So you see, Bosnia now is not a nation state, really, because it's a federal unity based on sovereignty of ethnic groups, which have political supremacy over individuals. So it is really, the citizenship of Bosnia is also another form of ethnic cleansing, really, because when the war started in '92, or a few months into it, citizenship was granted to those to the people on the land, but this was only limited where Bosnian army had the control. So you had that. Maybe you can go down to this further down, you can go to the colored map because it looks better, so you can see the country. You see where the red is, that's the one entity, the Republika Srpska, and the other, mainly the blue and the green, is what's called Federation, mainly Bosniak and Croat-controlled parts. So in Republika Srpska, they had their own law of Serb citizenship. And to get that citizenship, you have to accept the Serb culture and knowledge of the Serb language and the Cyrillic script, which is like the Russian, I guess. And then eventually during the war in '94, Bosniaks and Croats created an agreement to create this federation. So the Serbs created this Republika Srpska, and the Bosniaks and Croats created the federation, the other part, and this created a basis for the Dayton Peace Agreement, which was the Dayton Peace Accords, which was the peace agreement to end the war. So the Dayton Peace Agreement, which was in December of '95, there was a full-on war going on, and it was meant to end the war. But in order for anybody to sign a peace agreement, you had to have all these provisions. So eventually, in somewhere down the line, and I don't know what page, in Annex 7 of the peace agreement, a constitution of Bosnia and Herzegovina was written, which even today stands as the constitution of our country. Imagine if a constitution of a country is the 7th annex to some other peace agreement. It's obviously not, just saying that in itself, you would know that it's not viable. the implementation of the peace agreement was given to the High Representative, which is appointed by the EU. And its point is to serve as the political, is to contain political stability and oversee of the human rights. But the peace agreement has so many, I mean, the only good thing about the Dayton peace agreement is the fact that the violence stopped. Pretty much everything else was really bad, and it's creating a very bad future for the country in itself. Because it institutionalizes exclusion of all the people where they are minority. I mean, it perpetuates this type of a map as opposed to the pre-war map. It creates divides. All the policies, I mean, the Constitution is very ethnocentric and ethnopolitical. We only have one, we also have Bosnians always say, oh, we have a DC also, it's called Brčko, the city of Brčko, which you can see, actually it's in white all the way to the on the top right corner. No, of this map is just, it says Brčko. You see where it's located. It's just on the border between the two entities, and it's independent. It doesn't like all this other power doesn't hold, doesn't have, is not enforced in this one town. It's independent of it, where the ethnically divided entities do not apply. So in the Bosnian constitution, there are categorical distinctions between the constituent peoples. And those constituent peoples are Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs. We have other people these three, and then others. In others, you have Jewish people, you have Roma people, you have those that don't identify with any group, and so forth. But if you are other, you are excluded from a lot of the political access, really, because, for example, presidency, parliament, electoral law are only composed of these three constituent people. So, and then our current presidency. We don't have one president. We have three presidents at the same time of the country. We have a Croat, a Serb, and a Bosniak. And they are elected at the same time, and then they rotate every 8 months which one is in power. Can anything get done that way? And they can only imagine, like, if they cannot, every ministry position has 3 ministers. Every political position has all these different representation to be democratically included and so forth, but it only perpetuates further ethnic divisions and ethnic cleansing, really, and it only focuses on anybody that's being elected, that's wanting to be elected. It makes them only be elected based on their nationalism. And they're very able. They're probably most able than anybody else to truly run the country, but they couldn't. There was no place for them on the ballot. There was just no way to include them, and they were just excluded. And they went to the European High Court for Human Rights, and they sued the country of Bosnia against, there's a court, Bosnia versus Sejdić-Finci, which Sejdić-Finci won for exclusion, for their basic human right of inclusion in the political process. So they had a few resolutions and this and that, but nothing's being done. It's very, very, I mean, this is such a great opportunity for a country to truly look at itself and say, okay, here's an opportunity to step in and change our constitution, change our political structure, which is completely inefficient, and start over. Here we have, the European court decided this for us, and people in Bosnia somehow feel a lot more responsibility or willingness to do something when somebody else tells them to do it than when it comes from them directly. That's because when it comes from somebody directly, it comes from one of the sides. So nothing is taken, everything is politicized, everything, to the schools and everything else. I mean, this is a great quote. This is one current Bosnian writer. And I mean, he was just talking about, there was the Palestinian and Israeli came to Bosnia, and they met down with our three presidents to talk about the question over there. And this writer, Dejulovic, he goes, he's like, are you serious? They came to discuss the country dead seriously, which has one governor, 2 entities, 3 presidents, 4 paralegal systems, 5 regional development agencies, 6 social democrat parties, 7 communities named Bistrica, 8 journalist associations, 9 pyramids, 10 cantons, 11 different laws on the gun control, and 12 governments. Every entity, district, and canton in Bosnia and Herzegovina has its government except for Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's ridiculous. I think no less than half of the population that's employed is employed in some sort of a political office because there is no other place. So the main thing to do is that the Bosnian constitution has to be changed. It has to be current. It cannot be anymore what was written as an annex to a peace agreement. Whenever this point is raised, Serbs of Bosnia and Herzegovina see this as a threat to their existence. They now want to annex and become part of Serbia. So the situation is very, very difficult right now. The political situation that has been created as a result of ending the war has only continued the ethnic cleansing, has only continued these ethnic divisions and separations and really hate, to the point where people that we were not, even to the religion now, where we were not religious people. I mean, people were, maybe it was a private thing. It wasn't a big deal. But now, you know, all of a sudden you have people wearing crosses on their necks, which is crazy. You have women that are covered, which, you know, every once in a while there was a woman that was covered, but just with like a shawl on their neck, not this full-on black, you know, coverage. That's not our way. That's not our culture. Not even our religion. Never were Muslim people in Bosnia that way. It is going too extreme. As soon as one church is built up, another mosque is built up, and all this is funded by outside money. Outside, whether it's from Serbia, Serbia, but like Russia to Greece to Italy and the Vatican to Iran and Saudi Arabia, and they're all in it, you know, making their own identity in somewhere that's completely not theirs. You know, I asked an aunt of mine who was in politics. She was an ambassador. She's like, well, what is it that we can do? She's like, man. And I was asking her just very openly, do you think, is it that bad that there will be more war? She said, well, if we are only left alone, like just truly left alone, then we might actually even have a chance. And it's true, because you see that through the civil society organizations that are really working together, that have, you know, just separated themselves truly from politics. They're really, really good examples of that. So actually, because I just came from Bosnia, and it's 9 minutes, and I would like to show you, I made my first movie ever. So I'd like to share it with you. Please excuse it's about Sarajevo, and it's 20 years since it was for the 20 years anniversary since the beginning of the war. Just don't turn it up too loud, because I think I don't have. And then we can have questions. That's from my building. Those are the two hills that were shooting from each other. Those are kids singing.
for some questions?
Yes. Yes.
Did your parents survive?
They did, yeah. They were in the United States also. We came through a Reuniting Families program. They came here. And then actually my father ended up going back because he couldn't adjust here. Yes.
Could you repeat
Oh
the
yeah.
question?
The question was: have there been any talks about recreating the Bosnian constitution? And yes, there have, and that is the idea. And especially now with this case of Finci and Sejdic, who are unable to run, who have been, officially ruled in their favor against the Bosnian state, that changes need to be made. It's the most sticking point because the current Bosnian constitution gives the Serbs 49% of the land and the territory, and they have their own. There's a national government, and then each entity has its governments, and it's really complicated political situation. So it's like a threat to their existence. So it's gonna have to be done. But what it's going to take, it's right now a big Serb nationalist is the leader of the in Republika Srpska, like the prime minister, I guess. So it is the most sticking point. But this was thought that this would create an opportunity for this change with this ruling, but it's been so long already. So that's the biggest hope. Yes?
What's your feelings about the U.S. involvement in the Bosnian War?
It was unfortunate really because it came too late. It came at the wrong point because people were asking for it, but people were asking for it much earlier on, the support of the U.S. And, that's why I started off the whole presentation with the UN Undersecretary General who saw what was very clearly what was happening only not even a month into the war. And a lot could have been done immediately to prevent it. And I know that this has been one of the greatest regrets of the European Union and the US of not interfering sooner. But at the point when they interfered, so what happened was eventually, the Bosnian army, they finally created their strategy and learned after, 3-4 years how to fight, and they received enough weapons, smuggled enough weapons into the country because there was an embargo, that they kept pushing forward. They kept pushing the Serb forces out. And once they got pushed, the Bosnian army was in Banja Luka, which is now like the capital of the Serbian part. But once they started coming to there, it was finally when the Serbs even agreed to sit down and negotiate. But it was almost at that point where Bosnians should have been left to deal with it themselves because they were actually making progress at that point. So, yes.
Could you speak a bit about the status of the Roma, who are, again, caught in the middle of all of these factions?
Yes. They basically have no status, and it is a problem. And it's very amazing. And again, Roma was wanting to be one of the presidential candidates together with the Jewish leader, but they really they're extremely discriminated against, and their population is a lot smaller in Bosnia than, for example, in Serbia, Bulgaria, not to mention Romania, in other Eastern European countries. So it's almost seen as not as big of a problem, but just because they are in smaller numbers. but they're definitely discriminated against.
Still.
Yes?
How is the relationship now between Serbs and Bosnians?
The question was how is the relationship now between Serbs and Bosnians? It's interesting because I truly believe for the common people, it's a good relationship. It really is good. There are a lot of, I think there are probably even better relations between, the Bosnians and Serbians rather than Bosnian Serbs, like so Serbs that are from Serbia, because they're a little bit different, but it's almost like the Bosnian Serbs are the worse nationalists than those in Serbia, But there are a lot of programs and initiatives that are, the human rights initiatives and development initiatives that are cross-border, that are, across the Balkans, and a lot of those, the center is in Sarajevo. I feel there are a lot of civil society organizations that are working together. Just recently, even on this, and some friends of mine who are musicians from Sarajevo, they had a concert in the Republika Srpska and were received amazingly well, and it was a huge success. And, but as soon as you get on I think it truly is the politics that perpetuate the hate, because they cannot run on anything other than that. And people are very easily manipulated and persuaded. Yes?
Does Russia still have a heavy influence in the region, or where is it influence now?
Who?
Does Russia still have a strong influence in the region, or where is it influence now?
So the question is, does Russia still have a strong influence in the region? And the answer is yes, definitely. And you have Russia and Greek because naturally they are the same religion, the Orthodox religion, like the Serbs, and they really do support it, and they do have a lot of influence in from providing economic support and. Yes.
I'm really curious of the benefits of nonviolent protest versus an active resistance, so to speak. Obviously, there's ideally less loss of life from two sides fighting each other. What other kind of benefits are there for nonviolent resistance in essence?
And you said nonviolent resistance and active.
Something like arming yourself and going out and fighting. What do you consider the benefit?
Well, I feel that with armed resistance, not much can be achieved. I mean, for example, when the war started, there wasn't an alternative because people were going to be wiped off unless they resisted with arms. So in that situation, I think you needed to have arms and you needed to fight. But in terms of generally protesting and going against, resisting the situation when there isn't, so much violence, I think nonviolence is the way, because first of all, it's a lot more difficult to do, and it takes patience of a man emptying a sea with a teacup, right? And it's but the thing is, you do gain support, you gain moral support of the people and international, and nonviolent resistance doesn't just mean sitting down and not doing anything. It's active also. It's also very active resistance. That's why I wouldn't differentiate either nonviolent or active. There is a lot that, in nonviolent terms, it can be done that's very, very threatening, very active. It takes a lot of discipline and strength to do, rather than, I'm not saying that nonviolent resistance is just, going on a hunger strike or something like that. It's got to be more. We have to write policies, present options and alternatives, create movements, give the alternative, give a viable alternative to the current situation. So, other question? Yes.
I was wondering, is there any sort of pressure from like the younger communities, maybe like the university students or like high school, like knowledge of what's going on in front of them, wanting it to change, or pressuring the government to work together with each other and figure it out? And from that, how far do you think would it happen in the next generation, or this is going to be something that you're going to have to deal with for 50 years or
Yeah. So just if you haven't heard the question, it was more: is there an active movement by student groups or others to put pressure on the government and political leaders to work together, and how long would this process take and the change? And that's a very difficult question. Actually, just now they're starting to form like student bodies and student governments and things like that, which is a good thing. Again, it goes back, it's very difficult because in order for any politician to be in power, they have to work for their party. You have like a social democrat parties, but you have social democrat that are Croats, that are Serbs, that are Bosniaks, and in the name they should all be working together, but they're all just contradicting each other in every way, because every single party is based on that nationalism. There were a couple of parties that started, political parties that started. One is called Naša stranka, which literally translates to our party. And it's like, how is our party? Even like questioning it, you become it, And it was a great potential, and it was mainly like artists and sort of a little bit more progressive, I guess, community and young people, but they have like one seat in the government, and they have no funding, and with that, just no teeth, I guess. But there are those type of movements. In school systems, it's really difficult, especially younger, because again, schools become politicized in one hand as well, because each school is, like for example in the federation, we have these 10 cantons, which is like huge municipality, let's say, or county, let's say, but each canton has a majority population. And within that, automatically the minorities are discriminated against in one way or another. Now there are like theology studies in school, for example, but it doesn't teach everything. Like, and you can opt to not participate in it, but then you're like seen as an outsider. But the theology that's being taught is the majority theology, and it's. And history. History is one of the basic things. We have 3 histories, very distinct 3 histories of what happened. So, and then also with the Cyrillic alphabet, which is silly. I first learned Cyrillic before I learned Latin alphabet, just because that's how it came to me. I don't know, each class gets something else, but it's all the same thing to us, Our newspapers were written one page in Latin, one page in Cyrillic, so everybody could know everything. But now a lot of people in the Federation, the Bosnian Croat part, have never even learned it, which still is an official language of the country. Bosnia has 3 official languages. That's another thing: Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian, and which are basically different dialects. It's like saying Australian, British, and American, And but so it's just everything is so much politicized and divided to create these. It's hard to create groups. But for example, one of the strongest groups is called Youth Initiative for Human Rights, and they create these student bodies, and they go around, creating networks. They started off within Bosnia, but then they go out into Croatia and Serbia as well, and joint initiatives and so forth. So it's kind of hard to say. People are doing a lot, but it's gonna take a long time. Yes. Other questions?
I have some class business to take care of, so
Okay.
don't leave, but let's thank.
Thank you.